Yeah, I think a cool thing too is I think when you're in situations where maybe you are limited to like equipment and you don't have the access that you want equipment wise. I think especially if you're a trainer, like what's a big part of your job, right, is problem solving. It's like, okay, well, I don't have this machine to hit this exercise that I just really want to hit. Well, am I just gonna like throw my hands up and say like what the fuck, or like am I gonna like find a solution here and call an audible and get on with my trainings.
So, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you here. Do you mind just giving a quick, like maybe 30-second introduction of who you are, what you got going on?
Yeah, so my name is Peter Law. I am a personal trainer, coach, whatever you want to call me. It's the Wild West out here in the world of personal training and fitness. But I just had relocated to North Miami, Florida for grad school, and I go to Barry University, and I am a part of the exercise science master's program, and it's a concentration in sport, exercise, and performance psychology. And that's my little
Cool.
pitch there for you.
It's good. So, basically what I hope to accomplish with this podcast is just interviewing different people who are in different strength sports, have a history in being in the gym, and dig into the why behind the involvement with different strength sports and kind of the journey of how you ended up where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that being said, we'll start with some icebreakers. Favorite accessory?
Tough question. I'm going to say anything to do with the glute ham raise machine.
Really?
Yes, that is my baby right now. I do a ton of loaded like ab movements on there. I do a lot of like Nordic curls, back extension variations, oblique variation. Like there's so much you can do with it.
Okay, free weights or machines?
I'm gonna go with, I guess I'll go free weights, but I do like my machines too.
Yeah.
And I think, especially like for a lot of people that are involved in like powerlifting, like they might not use machines as much.
Yeah.
But I think like you can get a lot out of like machine work, and you can like really push it on machine work. If I had to choose, yeah, I would say I guess free weights. But
Okay, fair enough. Favorite barbell variation?
I was gonna say close grip bench press, even though I'm not like a great bencher. I just like close grip bench press. But if I had to choose one, I think I'd say Romanian deadlift.
Okay.
Yeah.
With a barbell?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I just think, yeah, I think it's such a good movement, and I mean, again, obviously like deadlift, there's a lot of variations, right? But 'cause I've seen guys like that we know mutually on like Instagram that are just like they're just like banging out a ton of weight on like RDLs. I'm like, bro, I gotta step my game up.
Yeah, I know. It's insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm always kind of impressed by that as well. All right. So can you kind of take me through your history from involvements in sports and being in the gym, and then how you ended up where you are today?
Right. I'll try and not make it too long, but yeah. So I mean, I grew up playing all different kinds of sports. Like I played football, I played basketball, I played baseball. I played street hockey as a kid. Like I loved playing street hockey too, and throughout high school, I like focused a little more on like football and basketball, and I liked it. Like I wasn't in love with playing the sports by any means. Like I liked like playing the games for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. Like I hated sports practice for some reason.
Mm.
And then in high school was when I really started to learn a little more about like the weight room. So like for football, obviously we had like our off season with strength and conditioning programming and all that kind of stuff. And of course, like I mean, looking back at it now, it's actually hilarious. Like the program was like, oh shit, it was like so bad.
Yeah.
Like I remember I remember distinctly to this day, like for like our like summer weightlifting program, like the first week we had like 10 sets of 10 on like bottom and like tension and like other like barbell movements, and they wanted the weight to be at like 50% or something, which is like relatively like, yeah, it sounds light, but then you like think back to it, you're like, dude, that's like disgusting. It like kind of broke my soul a little bit doing like 10 sets of 10 for back squat at like a relatively kind of challenging weight. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck on, but yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, so then after that, I graduated high school and I went in the military. So I went in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years. And then even then, that's when, fitness kind of looked a little different, where especially for boot camp, it was more so, it was all about like running and like push-ups, pull-ups, crunches, and hiking with a pack on your back too.
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt. So you grew up in the Northeast?
Yes.
And
yes,
then where did you go for boot camp?
So yes, so I was born and raised in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and then I went to boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina. That's where most recruits. So if you grew up anywhere on the eastern side of the Mississippi River, you go to Parris Island for boot camp. And if you grew up anywhere west of the Mississippi River, you go to San Diego, California for boot camp out there. After that, I went to Marine Corps Combat School, which when I went was called School of Infantry, and that was like 3-ish months. And then after that, I went to another school. It's called like the Basic Security Guard School or something. That's like you learn a little more about like firearms and everything, and like clearing like houses and rooms and all that kind of stuff. Then I went to my first unit, and my first unit was in Norfolk, Virginia, and I did a few deployments out there, and it was a deployment, quote unquote, but it was like a rotation to Guantanamo Bay. Okay. Because at the time, the border of Cuba and like Guantanamo Bay was still closed because Cuba was still like under, from what I believe, they were still under a communist regime. And as we were there, they're like kind of slowly opening up the border there, so you'd like go out into Cuba. And then my second deployment, I did a Europe rotation, so I was mostly out of Spain, and we bounced around to Ukraine for a while, and we got to do some advising for the Ukrainian military for their war out in Russia, which is really cool. We stopped in Sicily for a little bit, went back to Spain. We did a lot of training with the Spanish and Italian militaries. And then after that, I came back to the States, and then I was sent to Camp Pendleton, California, which is now the West Coast. So I was out there for my last like 2.5 years or so. There, I did a deployment to Southeast Asia, where we were on a boat for like 4 months out of the 6 months. So we like floated around. We went to Thailand for a bit. We went to Guam for a bit, and we also stopped in. We were kind of stationed in Okinawa, which is a little island like just south of Japan, for a bit of time. And I came back from that deployment, and I had just like 10 months left on my contract, and I was like, yeah, I'm getting out. And so the last 10 months, I was just kind of chilling, and then I got out in during COVID of 2020.
Oh wow, okay.
So that was an interesting time, like kind of transitioning back to the real world, and like the whole world shut down. So yeah, that was kind of crazy.
It's probably hard enough to do that not during a global pandemic, but
yeah, for sure. It was. I mean, one thing I've learned about the Marine Corps, the military in general, like especially the Marine Corps that a lot of people talk about, is like they try with like all their effort to like make sure you're ready to go in the Marine Corps, but then like as soon as you get out, it's like, all right, like off, go do whatever. So I got out, and like I had some ideas of what I wanted to do. I was really into like EMS, because I learned a lot of that kind of stuff in the military, as like combat life support and like treating like gunshot wounds and everything. That was like really interesting to me. Yeah. So I originally went to school to be a trauma nurse for EMS. Mm-hmm. And then very quickly, within like a few months, I'm like, yeah, this ain't it. I just not really scratching an itch here. And then nothing against it, but it just wasn't really my thing. And then after that, like I switched majors around a lot, and I had found psychology And then I was like, oh, like I've always been really into, why people do the things they do, like in human behavior and like critical thinking and all that kind of stuff. And I attribute a lot of that to philosophy too. Like I've always had a pretty big interest in philosophy, and even to this day, like I'll read like some philosophical texts here and there. But then I at least for me and what I wanted to do, I thought psychology was a little more appropriate. So I studied psychology the rest of my undergrad. So my first 2 years I went to Community College of Philadelphia, and then my last 2 years I went to Temple, and I graduated with an undergrad in just psychology. And then I would say my junior year at Temple, I was kind of like done with college. Like, not that it was really hard, but like I kind of felt like I wasn't getting a lot out of it, maybe. But then, I had a growing interest in wanting to work in the fitness industry and like work as a coach and work as a trainer and stuff like that. And like my last like going into my senior year of Temple, like I had found out a lot about like sport and exercise and performance psychology. I'm like, oh, this is sick. Like, you get to work with like, you can work with like sports teams. You can work with like, like exercise clients, like with personal training and stuff like that. You can work with like, and there's a lot of performance psychology people that work with like people that work in high risk jobs, like, military or like firefighters or cops or like even, like surgeons or like doctors or something like that. And that was really interesting to me. So then halfway through my senior year of college, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to grad school. Like, I think this is the right move. And every program I applied to was online except one, and the one program that was in person that I applied to, I got accepted to, and now I'm living down here because of that program. And that program is Barry University down in the Miami Shores area in Florida. And I think training-wise, if we want to like reverse a little bit, I guess my training has like kind of been all over the place as far as like different like goals and like demands and what I wanted. And I touched on the high school one a little bit, and that was more for like sports, obviously, like more like a strength and conditioning aspect.
Yeah.
And then going to the military, like is a lot more like a lot of calisthenics base, and like I would go to the gym and weight train, but like my biggest focus was like getting really good at pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, running, crunches, and hiking with a main pack.
Yeah.
And then throughout the military, it was kind of the same, but then I started picking up weight training a little more, where like I would kind of do like your typical like bodybuilding, like push pull leg split, and of course every session was RPE 10. Which probably wasn't the best idea looking back on it, but that's how you learn, right? So
yeah.
But then the last like 10, I guess, so that time period when I came back from my last deployment and had like some more time in my hands before I got out, that's when I really started leaning a lot more onto just like purely strength training. So I weaned back a lot on like the running and like the more calisthenic stuff, and I started to learn a lot more about like how to really do the compound lifts, like really trying to like educate myself on how to like do a half decent squat, like a half decent deadlift, a half decent bench and everything. And then when I was living out there, like when I came back to PA, I was like kind of back and forth between PA and in California at the time. Like I was kind of back and forth.
Okay.
And when I was out in California the one time, I went to it wasn't the American Pro, it was the US Kern Open, and it was the meets they used to have out at it was the gym was in San Diego. They closed it down now, but it was California Elite Training Center, and that gym was phenomenal. It was like that gym was sick, and like I would go in there and like train here and there, and like there was like these, like I didn't really know what powerlifting was at this time. And I would see people in there squatting like 700 for reps. I'm like, holy like I thought I was strong. Never mind. Like this is insane. And of course at the same time there's a lot of like high level bodybuilders there too. And then I had found out that they were doing like the US Kern Open at that gym like sometime later. So I went to go see it. And I'm like, holy shit, like this is sick. Like I want to give this a shot.
Yeah.
And then that kind of started me going into doing my first powerlifting meet that like 2 months later, I think after that.
Oh wow.
And yeah, like when I had what I had thought powerlifting was up until I saw it at the U.S. Open. Like I had thought powerlifting was just like a bunch of old dudes like in like squat suits and like knee wraps and like doing like the extremely wide, almost box, like almost like box squat style squatting. And
Yeah,
they're
like old school,
yeah, like the old school like West Side kind of
West
barbell
Side. Yep.
style. Like
Yeah, on a monolift.
yeah, like that's what I thought powerlifting was. I was like not that like respect where respect's due, but like for me I was like like I don't really care. But like I saw like for this it was like oh like people are just like in like a singlet and just like lifting heavy ass weight and like oh like this is actually like pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like I had competed in I believe 3 meets. Yeah, I did 3 meets in a span of like a year and a half or so, and I really enjoyed it. Like I thought I made like pretty decent progress. I was by no means like a high level lifter. Like I was like relatively I guess like decently strong, but like compared to like the world of powerlifting, I was by no means like this like high level lifter by any means. For some reason, like after my 3rd meet, like something I did my last meet, which I guess was like almost a year and like 3 months ago. For some reason, like just leading up to the last like month or so of that meet and like right after, I was just like that. For some reason, like the itch wasn't really there anymore.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, not that like I have I honestly I of course have nothing against the sport of powerlifting, but like for me I was just kind of like I was like maybe I'll come back to this at some point, but like right now when I kind of go off and like discover and do other things and
Yeah.
I think for me personally, at least, I had kind of missed like some of the training I did when I was in the military, where like you did more. I guess I don't like using the word hybrid training because I just think there's a weird connotation around that kind of language. But I guess more like a concurrent style of training where it's like you're training different qualities at once. So it's like right now like I'm trying to like get faster. Like so I go to the track and I do like my sprint work, but I obviously still do like my strength work like a couple times a week too, and like I obviously do all my accessories and stuff like that. And for me personally, I really enjoy it because it kind of reminds me of like what I did in the military. Was like you were like preparing yourself for like a lot of different tasks at once per se.
Right.
But it also there's a lot of like variability in there, and like for me at least, it keeps things very fresh and it lets me experiment with a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And like to be fair to you, I guess like healthier might be one word, but I think I just feel a lot more. I guess like I feel a lot more like at home in the way I train now, if that makes sense. And like like don't get me wrong, it definitely sucks that like I can't squat like nearly as much as I used to when I was like doing, powerlifting specific training.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a hit to my ego a little bit of like I'm not squatting as heavy, and like even like obviously my other lifts too, like I'm not benching or deadlifting as heavy, but I mean at the same time I'm more so viewing it in the view of I'm enjoying the process because this is what I like exploring with and like kind of diving into my curiosity more.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, I really enjoy the way I train now, and it's been like a lot of fun so far, just like especially with sprinting, like just it's learning like a whole new skill set. And like I'm by no means like a good sprinter either, but it's something it's fun to like dive into and kind of learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that was very long-winded, but I guess like that was kind of my training history and kind of like where I'm at now. I guess you could say like fitness journey, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. And do you have any particular goals that you're working toward, or are you just kind of enjoying where you're at right now and experimenting with different things? I mean, I know you did a track meet, but what are your plans now?
So I definitely want to do another track meet at some point. And like, I guess the cool thing about down here in Florida is like it's pretty warm year round, so you can find like a lot of track.
That is nice.
All the time.
Yeah.
So that's something I'll focus where like I'm trying to get like just faster and get my time down a little bit. Like, but I would say also too like just raising my general fitness levels, if that makes any sense. Like I just like see how far I can get with this kind of style of like concurrent training where like I'm practicing or I'm developing like speed, but I'm also trying to develop like power and strength all kind of simultaneously. And it is a little trickier. But I like it because I feel like again it keeps me curious, and it lets me explore like my own programming. And, okay, maybe this works for this, but maybe this doesn't work for that. It even lets me explore like different different ways of programming, for example, right? Like, obviously for a long time it was very like linear periodization, but now I'm kind of exploring more of like an undulating periodization. But it's fun though. Like I really enjoy it. I guess, like I said, I guess my main goal would be just to see how far I can get with that, and as honestly as long as it keeps me curious and fulfilled with my own training, then I'm gonna stay with it.
Yeah, just kind of like overall preparedness as well.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's a good word. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
because to your point, I don't feel like powerlifting is the most applicable to anything outside of powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you could still lift more than you could, but if you're not bracing properly or with the correct weight in the right spot or whatever, it's not really going to apply to anything else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the reason I'm really glad I was in that powerlifting, I guess, like world for like a good bit too, is because it has translated a little more to like, for example, like speed than I would have thought, right? Like, obviously like when I first started sprinting, like even now, like my technique's not that great because it is a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, when I had first started like sprinting, like I wasn't as slow as I thought it'd be, and then I think a lot of that is because like, when you're stronger, like that's never a bad thing. So like when you're stronger,
Right.
like it does help with speed development, those speed qualities in different ways per se.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess explosiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a lot of experience being in the gym with different people and seeing different athletes and different gym goers, and we talk a lot about people's mindset and stuff. What's a mindset that you wish more people had in the gym?
I think I would say it's funny because I was going to say ego, but I don't think that's a good answer because I think everyone has ego.
Yeah.
I think if I had to choose one, I guess I would say like be more accepting of where you're at and like make the most of where you're at instead of like wishing you were this person or like you were like had this quality or something.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I had struggled with for a while, and like especially in powerlifting where like even though I was like a 242, 265, which in kilograms is what 110 and 125 the weight classes.
Yeah.
Like I was definitely weaker than a lot of like the 110, the 125s especially. But at the same time, I kind of realized like, okay, well, like, I'm also, for my weight class, I'm also fairly tall. Like I was always by far like the tallest person. Now I know you can relate to because you're also pretty tall.
Yeah.
And moving that much weight, that much of a distance is a lot more taxing when you have that much more range of motion, right?
Right.
And yeah, I think in general, just you could say powerlifting, but I think just in general, like people focus so much on what they want to be, and like there's nothing wrong with like goal setting and like wanting to like strive to be something, but I think also like people like shoot themselves in the foot a lot because they want this particular quality or trait so bad, or they're not like accepting of like where they are and just like working with what they got. And I think that kind of leads to a lot of like this all or nothing mentality in the gym. I'm not saying don't hold yourself to a high standard, like always train, always lift with a high quality of effort, but at the same time, like just be honest with yourself and like just be aware of like where you are, and just know that like everyone, like every single person in the gym and every single quality they have, like everyone's different, and it's the more you compare yourself, like you're just holding yourself back that much more instead of just comparing yourself to the person you were yesterday or the person you were last week or something.
Yeah. I think that goes to kind of technique critique as well. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people saying they'll execute something really nicely, or maybe it'll be close to a PR or something like that, and immediately afterwards they're tearing themselves down saying, I should have done this differently, my chest came forward, whatever it is. And they tear themselves apart, and like you were saying, enjoy where you are in the moment. take the win. You know, there's always room for improvement, but finding that balance between striving for greatness, getting better, finding your flaws, and also just accepting that was a good lift. You know, I'm happy that I executed that well, or I did have a long work week and didn't get a lot of sleep this week, so taking that into account, I actually didn't have that bad of a lifting day.
I think one thing, I had thought about a lot too, where, especially now where like a lot of my, like I kind of mentioned earlier, how a lot of my lifts have like definitely gone down in strength relative to like where I was when I was doing like powerlifting specific training, and for good reason, because now it's like, now I'm not just focusing on like pure like barbell movement compound strength. I'm focusing on a lot of different qualities too, but I look at it now, it's like, okay, sure, like maybe I'm not lifting as much, but it's like, what's the quality of my movement? Like, how do I look? Like, how do my feet look? Like, how does my posture look? How does my spine look? How does the bar speed look at like a certain weight, right? I'm a firm believer that I think weight training, and it's like fitness really as a whole, but like weight training in itself is a skill, and by doing those repetitive movements like over and over and over again, like that in itself is developing a skill, because it's repetition, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, it's like if you're like a carpenter or something, like, and yeah, like hammering a nail all the time, like, yeah, it gets repetitive and boring quickly. You can think about it and be like, well, I'm gonna be a hell of a lot better at hammering nails a year from now if I do 100 nails a day compared to if I just do like 30 or 20 a day or something. And that's kind of the same with like weight training. I feel like, where it's like there's skill to be gained even by just doing the movements in itself. And it's not to say that like you should half-ass your movement and be like, whenever you perform any kind of movement in the gym, like try and be cognizant of like, okay, like let's improve this movement quality. Like me doing this set in itself is practice. It's gaining skill. And I think that in itself is like kind of a win, because like because us humans, we're creatures of like repetition. Like we need like all the repetitions, and the more we do an activity, obviously the more we're going to get better at it. And I think, like you said, like take that win sometimes. Like it might not be what you had imagined in your head, but like you just even doing it, that's a win in itself, and just building that repetition.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is training is a skill, and you learn a lot about yourself in training as well. What are some of the things that you think people take away from strength training and learn about themselves? I feel like being in the gym and having that regimen and discipline, it teaches you a lot about yourself as well, not just how to move weight. Like, did you experience that at all, or can you relate to that at all?
I guess like personal development as a byproduct of like weight training in itself.
Yeah.
I would say so. I do think weight training in itself has, and fitness as a whole really has developed my personality a ton. And as far as like, we can say a lot of things, with like discipline and like hard work and like showing up and consistency and like, good habits and all that. But in a very weird way, it's helped me learn how to have interests outside of weight training as well. Mm-hmm. I guess a good example for this, for me, that I had kind of recently had thought about a lot and like wrote about, is I take a lot of influence like from art, for example, and like kind of related to fitness and weight training in a sense, where it's like there's a lot of like creativity that to be had in weight training, where there's a lot like everyone kind of moves a little differently, and there's a lot of there's a lot of like individuality in training.
Yeah,
it's helped me develop a sense of like I look at things outside of fitness and try and carry them into fitness. And I feel like that has helped me form and mold my thought processes a lot in training itself, in a very almost weird and abstract way.
Yeah, and I do feel like historically weight training has been looked at as such a science, and at its core it is, But I think when you start to talk about coaching, it has to be tailored to the individual. And there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. And when people, people joke about, oh, I did my first powerlifting meet, I'm going to become a coach. I don't think that take that part into account. They just think, oh, I know the science behind training. I know how to write a program. But they don't think about the interpersonal aspect as much. And that goes back to your point of you have to have a creative flair as well. You can't just be by the book 100% of the time in the data, because the data doesn't always tell you everything.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned a lot from coaching that is like it takes a lot of a lot of EQ, like a lot of like emotional intelligence, a lot of like emotional connection with your clients, and like realizing what they need. But I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned as a coach recently in the past couple of years, where it's like the science and the textbooks and like all the research and all that is great, but it does really come down to like just being like a good problem solver and like knowing how to read the room in front of you and like knowing like what the environment is. Maybe it doesn't go by a textbook, but for like the betterment of like the client and like where they're at in their situation, like that's the decision you need to make. I don't want to sit here and act like I'm this like hardened, seasoned veteran coach. I'm not, but at the same time, I think one thing I learned very quickly was, you gotta go like off the beaten path a little bit to like fix some of these problems, and like they might not be the most like scientifically researched, backed solutions, but at the end of the day, like if it's the solution that's gonna help your client with what they need the most, and to me that's the right decision to make,
right?
At least in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good answer. All right, what's one thing that you wish were different about the community, whether it be powerlifting or just the gym in general?
Really good question. I think if I could change one thing, I would say maybe the sense of like entitlement in a weird way. I don't know where this came from, but I feel like in the past like 5 to 10 years, there's been this weird entitlement of like people acting like just because they like go to the gym and train or whatever, it's like they had this weird sense that like they're like better than others just because they like dedicate time and they have the privilege, dare I say, of like being able to like go to the gym and have that time to build themselves physically, body composition or athleticism or whatever it is. And I think that's one thing a lot of us forget about, and that's something I forget about, and that's something I keep needing to remind myself, is like to be able to express my physical prowess in a way of, whether it's of speed, strength, endurance, whatever it is, like at the end of the day, it is a privilege, because I mean, there's so many people that are stuck in a wheelchair or something, or they might be working 3-4 jobs because they have to like support a family or something. Like they would love to get in and like get a workout in with everyone, but they literally physically can't because they're working all these jobs and they have to feed their kids, and or again with the people that physically aren't like able to do that, right? Yeah. And I think it's a good like perspective shift in a sense of like when you start thinking about that, it makes you realize like just how lucky you are, and it's very easy to get caught up in those little things, kind of like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, oh, like I didn't hit my like top set of squats or bench or whatever, and you like completely beat yourself up over it. And again, it's not to say that like you shouldn't hold yourself to that high standard, but just take it for what it is and like move on, learn from it, and just like keep going forward. And it's so easy to get like stuck on these things. We're not going to be able to do this forever. Right. I mean, yeah, we can do this when we're. I think it's cool. Don't get me wrong, that like we're seeing people well into their 60s and 70s that are still weight training, which is sick, and I hope to be that person. But to think you're gonna be at this level or this like level of like physical capability for like that long, like you gotta like take a step back a little bit, man. You gotta keep your privilege in check, bro. Like it's again just like enjoy where you're at. It's Of course, there's always going to be someone stronger. There's always going to be someone bigger. There's always going to be someone faster or more ripped and jacked than you. But like, dude, like, as long as you're trying with like all your effort and like you're ticking the boxes that you can tick, like, stay hungry. I think a lot too about, and I constantly have to remind myself of this because I get caught in the, oh, this
machine isn't exactly what I want or whatever. I think a lot about the people who don't even have access to good gym equipment or gym equipment at all, and they're moving hay bales because they want to get stronger, or they're stuck with power racks in the gym. Some people I know would pass away if they saw nothing but power racks in a gym. They would drive 2 hours to get to a combo rack, which is fine. I understand it's a craft and you want to have the right equipment, but I think at the core you have to have that reality check every once in a while and say, it's so nice to have this state-of-the-art equipment at my fingertips whenever I want it, and when I show up to meet day or whatever, I have access to that outside of that as well. Like, I'm training with the stuff that I'm going to be using.
Yeah, I think a cool thing too is, I think when you're in those situations where maybe you are limited to like equipment and you don't have the access that you want equipment wise, I think especially if you're a trainer, like what's a big part of your job, right, is problem solving. It's like, okay, well, I don't have this machine to hit this exercise that I just really want to hit. Well, am I just gonna like throw my hands up and say like, what the fuck? Or like, am I gonna like find a solution here and call an audible and and get on with my training? I think sometimes it's kind of good to get in that kind of environment, because it kind of forces you to not only like have to like problem solve and be like, okay, like I have to make an adjustment here, like I have to make a replacement for this exercise, but again, it kind of makes you realize like, damn, like the gym I go to is like pretty fucking sick, and I'm again very grateful. And again, I think when you have that attitude of like, I'm very lucky and blessed to be able to be healthy enough to train and like have this equipment to me, it makes you, I think at least for me, it makes me a little more like engaged in my training, and like it makes me put out into it, at least for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it gives you some autonomy as well. Mm-hmm. You might have, I don't know, cable pull downs on your program, but if there's not a cable machine in the gym, you'll find something else to make it work. And it gives you that empowerment, because your coach doesn't want you texting them every second of every day saying, oh my God, they don't have a cable machine here. What do I do? Help. Take the power into your own hands as well.
Yeah.
What do you want to train? What muscle group do you want to train? Find something that works, because I guarantee you can find something.
And again, I think how this kind of like I was saying earlier with like how I take other things into account into like my training or coaching is like, again, like with a situation like that where it's like a piece of machine or machinery is missing or something, forces you to problem solve, but also it forces you to have to like get creative a little bit and like critically think a little bit and be like, okay, well, like out of the exercises I know and that I'm aware of, like what looks the most similar and what is trying to achieve the most similar kind of stimulus that I'm looking for. And again, like you might have to get like a little creative sometimes. Like might not be like fucking perfect, but like if it's again, it's better than nothing. And it kind of defeats that like all or nothing mindset where it's like, oh, like if I don't have this thing or that thing, then I'm just not gonna fucking do it. Again, that's kind of like a self-limiting defeatist mindset, which that's a whole other fucking rabbit hole. It comes back to that like all or nothing mindset where it's like, well, like if you can control, if you're gonna let like these outside forces, I guess you could say, like in the environment or like whatever it is, like dictate, and then again, like that's indicative of you to kind of work on those like self-regulating techniques where it's like, okay, well, like this is what I do have and this is what I do have control of. Let's forget the noise, let's forget about what I don't have, and let's focus on what I do have, because what I don't have and what's out of my control of like what I don't have access to, that right now that's out of my control and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's why, I don't know, that's why I'm enjoying talking to different people and stuff, because it helps kind of reiterate that. I think a lot of times in the gym you're in a bit of an echo chamber where it's really easy to complain, and when somebody else is not even complaining, but just, I don't know, airing their grievances, if you will, it's really easy to catch on to that and say, oh yeah, this does suck, so it's kind of nice to be reminded of those things, and I don't know, keep them at the forefront, because it is easy to forget, and it is easy to, go along with what other people are saying and thinking. But I think at the root of it too, it's important to remember why we enjoy what we're doing. And if we don't anymore, then how can we adapt that to find joy in it again? You know, like you were saying earlier, you've adapted a bunch of stuff just to find what you enjoy, because if you're going to spend that much time in the gym during a week, then you might as well enjoy it at least a good fraction of the time, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a big take-home message for me too, is like, you know, I forget that shit a lot too, where it's like I have my moments where, you know, I kind of I'm you know, I'm complaining about like something, or I kind of like I'm not really, I don't really have something in the forefront of my mind. And again, like conversations like this is good because, like you said, it gets you out of the echo chamber, and it kind of like grounds you again to like let you take a step back and be like hold up, like let me check myself a little bit here. Like,
Yeah.
it's really like, it's really not that big of a deal, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, one final question for you. So when you remember getting on social media and starting to follow all the gym people and stuff, who do you remember being the most influential person that you started following in the beginning?
Is this like locally? Like
No,
people we know?
I mean, it could be whoever.
I guess this is a little more, I guess, recent, but I think someone I look up to a lot in the industry, just because I think he does such a great job of being like a very solid professional and practitioner in the field, but also just someone that's very educated and he's very well respected, but he's also a very stand-up guy. His name's Jordan Shallow, and he's the founder of a company called Prescript, and that company, like, their whole thing is like education, pretty much. They have a lot of like different courses you can take, but it's top notch like education, and it's something that I attribute a lot of my knowledge and a lot of my everything I really align and believe in has come from him and his brand, because I think he sets the standard for what it should be going forward. So I would say right now, I think he's probably the biggest influence on my career so far, and like kind of just how I view fitness as a whole, and on a much more deeper, maybe like even more like a philosophical kind of level.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, I really appreciate you being on and spending the time.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.
Yeah, this is fun. I like this a lot. Yeah, this is sick.